Hi, I'm Melody Bacon,
And I'm Ron Bacon.
and we're with Relationship University, and we're bringing you another topic that we have found comes up a lot in our work as psychotherapists.
in our in our lives in general, I
Sure.
mean, it's just the way humans are.
Yeah, exactly. And that is how to manage conflict. And it is an age old question, and I think one that we have maybe learned a little bit about now that we understand a little bit better about how the brain functions and why it's so difficult for us. But we'd like to share a few ideas that can assist you in having better conflict with people whom you love in
Mm-hmm.
particular, because the more we love someone, the harder it is to have effective conflict.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps it's about not trying to figure out how to not have conflict.
Right.
The question is how to have productive versus unproductive
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that we highly recommend is that before you bring up a topic that is a difficult one, and we all have those, that you give it some thought about what exactly is your position on this topic based on your values. We have a lot of feelings, that's what makes life colorful and interesting, but feelings can also make it very difficult for us to have effective conflict because we get very passionate and we get threatened sometimes and we get scared, and all of those things are natural, but they do make it hard to think about things clearly. So if we haven't thought about a topic that we're having difficulty with our partner on, in terms of what's my value system here, what information do I need to know, would be another question to ask yourself from my partner. And thirdly, I think that your goal isn't necessarily to convince your partner to agree with you. And that, I think, is probably the biggest thing that you could take off the table, because once we're trying to convince, we get off of the position of trying to understand and really work toward coming to some kind of a point where we can move forward.
Mm-hmm. Part of what makes conflicts more intense is when there's a time constraint. We
Yes.
have to decide right now. That's why driving conflict, between a driver and the
Right.
navigator, can be so intense. The GPS systems and all that has taken some of that out.
Mm-hmm.
At least we can blame the machine rather than
Right.
the person who's next to us, and you know but that's what made it so challenging, is
Mm-hmm.
because there's an urgency and you have to know
Mm-hmm.
now and make a decision. And sometimes those time you can sort out some when you're driving. Yeah, there is something, but you can,
Mm-hmm.
most decisions aren't irreversible when
Right.
you're driving. Don't get into an accident, that's the number one. But so being gracious when there's a mistake, knowing that you're
Mm-hmm.
with somebody who's a human, that means there are going to be mistakes. Why did you do that is a terrible question to
Mm-hmm.
ask, because you're going to get the person to justify why they did
Yeah,
what
they'll
they
be
just did.
defensive.
So, how could I help you make a better decision is maybe a better
Mm-hmm.
question, that you're on the same team with that
Mm-hmm.
question, something along that line. But there are some decisions that they seem urgent and like you have to decide now, and you really don't. And overnight is not going to be a bad
Mm-hmm.
thing, or over the course of some time is not going to be a bad thing. You need to make a decision, but it doesn't have to be immediate. And
Yeah. I
so
think what we're talking about is brain regulation.
yeah.
And there are a lot of recent books. A good one, Hardwiring Happiness by Rick Hanson, I recommend. It explains how our brains work naturally. And one of the the aspects of our brain that is really challenging for us is the largest part of our brain, the limbic system, and that is activated when we feel threatened in any way. It doesn't matter if there's a literal threat, if it's just your partner being frustrated with you or saying they want to move and you don't want to move, for example, is likely to activate a threat response on the part of your brain where it feels as though, it's fight or be killed. And some of our conflict can devolve into that kind of intensity, even though later on you can say, well, I don't even know what we were arguing about, but you do know that it really got ugly. So what we're suggesting is, with regard to thinking about what you want to say, what your position is, and then being curious about your partner's view, really requires a lot of ability to have access to a calm brain. And as Ron mentioned, timing is important. There's very few things that you have to make a decision on now, even though you might be being pressured into it. Let's say you want to have a child and your partner doesn't. Usually you don't have to make up your mind within the next hour on that topic. But your brain will get activated to where if we don't figure this out, it's going to be terrible and devastating, and you get so upset and frustrated and angry and scared that you're not able to hear anything your partner's saying. Your partner is often in the same position, and so both of you are trying to get each other to listen to each other and to understand, and neither person is available to that because both of your brains have functionally gone offline. So one way to do it is to take your time, to not feel pressured, but also to set a time limit for how long you will have a discussion on a topic that you already know is going to be difficult. And another man, John Gottman, who has been researching couples for 40 plus years, says that his research shows that every couple will have 2 to 3 irresolvable differences. It doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about these things. It just means that they're highly unlikely to just go away. You're not going to get to a place, for example, where the two of you have resolved all your differences and you don't have any more. And so it's not either or. It's not, okay, well, he's never going to change, I give up, or she's never going to change, it's not worth talking about. That's not the point. The point is that you appreciate the fact that this is part of what it means to be in a romantic relationship, an important relationship with someone, a family member as well. And so you really want to respect your own physiology, and that is, you may have a 10-minute time limit before you start to feel scared, frustrated, angry, your blood pressure's going up, your respiration is fast. Those are all letting us know that threat response has already been activated, and it would be a good idea at that point to take a break so you can lower your reactivity.
Yeah, taking a good breath is often useful to stay connected with your clearest thinking versus those emergency, I'm about to die, or threat responses. One other thing, as you were speaking about that, I thought what makes a discussion challenging is if suddenly the kids are, you bring in somebody vulnerable as going to be impacted, and
that's a good point.
Suddenly we can't even think straight. You mean you don't care about our kids? And it's not even a question, an honest question. That's a club that's being used, and so that can happen. Not just with a couple and their own children. We start seeing it in communities and various ways where children are brought into the discussion, and it makes the discussion more difficult rather than easier.
And I think that comes from another misunderstanding, which is that I'm trying to win this debate. And this is not a good model for conflict, because if you have one winner and one loser, you have two losers. Particularly in significant relationships that are meaningful. There should be the sense that we're on the same team. And if you're on the same team, you can't have a winner and a loser who are on the same team. You're both playing for the same team. And to hold on to that is very important, because how you treat a teammate is going to be different than you treat someone on the opposite team. And if you are under the impression that one of us is going to be right and the other one wrong, you're already looking at it through the lens of winning and losing. So the best rule of thumb is to really approach more from a position of curiosity. I'm not understanding, and when you say that, you need to really mean that you don't understand, and you're not being sarcastic. That you don't understand their thinking.
The question is not, how can you be so stupid?
Right,
That's not curiosity.
Why in the world would you even think that?
Yeah.
Those are all fake questions. A real question is, help me understand your perspective. I may not agree with it, and agreement and understanding are not the same thing. And you can seek to understand a person's perspective, at least by saying, well, if I were in your position and I saw things that way, I understand that you would come to that conclusion. Would you mind if I shared mine? So curiosity, number one. If you're not curious, you're just angry or frustrated, fine. You can wait until you are curious. That's the nice thing about being in a committed relationship with someone, that you have the time to say, okay, my brain's not available. I'm just frustrated, angry, irritated. This is not going to be a good time to bring this up. So curiosity. And then secondly, when you're really curious and you're not trying to win, you're trying to understand. The second point that I like people to keep in mind is to reflect back what you hear that person saying. Okay, so here's how you see, here's how I'm hearing you say this. And then the partner can say, well, that's not exactly what I meant to say. Or let's say your partner is responding in a way that is confusing you. You didn't think they would respond that way. You can ask your partner, well, what did you hear me say? Now, once they tell you what they heard you say, it is not a good idea to respond, well, that's not what I said, you must be nuts, or imply that. Okay, I can't believe you would think that. Okay, because that's basically setting somebody up just to whack them, metaphorically speaking. When they say, well, what I heard you say is, you think I'm a lazy jerk, you can say, okay, let me try that again, because I didn't mean to imply that. Maybe my tone of voice wasn't the best or whatever, but here's what I wanted to say. I'm frustrated you didn't take the trash out on Tuesday night, and now our trash truck has come by. That, it sounds clunky and it sounds silly over those kinds of topics. A lot of my clients will say that, well, that's not the big issue. But you can't start this kind of process with a big issue when you don't have the skill sets. So you start with the smaller things that are frustrating, but they're not up there with, oh, are we going to have a kid or not? Are we going to move? How are we going to do our retirement? All the big things that really, activate our defense systems. So those would be the two main things that you could take away. Well, three, I suppose. One is to really be aware of your brain being activated, and you'll feel it in your body. We all know, and we are. And to get some space where you can calm, reflect, breathe, get the brain settled. Then enter with some curiosity about your partner and lead with that. What are you seeing happen? What would you like to see happen? Asking good questions. And thirdly, reflecting back what you're hearing your partner say. If you just do those three things, you will have significantly better conflict. And you don't even need 100% on that. Even 25 to 30% better is a lot better.
I mean, football analogies aren't bad. We're not in football season at the moment, but that, say, an offensive lineman, it's his job to make sure that the quarterback is protected long enough to make the play. And say the lineman didn't have the assignments right, and the guy just ran through and sacked the quarterback. They have a huddle, and in the huddle, the quarterback isn't saying, you jerk. Typically, that's not going to do any good. It's not going to help them. They have a limited amount of time. communication has to be clear. It's how do we go about, we're all on the same team here, and we have the same goals and objectives, and if we don't work together, that's all understood. It doesn't have to be said. So the quarterback, I don't know what they say in there. I've never been an offensive lineman. I haven't been a quarterback either, but being able to get to the play, and then I'm sure that between the center and the other linemen, they're pointing and looking at what's the assignments, and they're working to do a better job, which gives everybody else some sense
So you're on the same team.
Yeah. And so in the midst of a discussion, if it's like, it doesn't feel like we're on the same team, how could we get there before we keep going? That's not bad. How do we look at this together and make this better?
Yeah. So those are some tips. We will come back to this topic again. There's a lot to say. Thanks for chiming in. Keep watching our videos. We do have a wonderful program, Family Matters, for families who are struggling with someone whom they love who has an addiction. And you can check that out on our website on Relationship Visions Inc., INC, relationshipvisionsinc.com. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.